Good afternoon, everyone. So this photograph is quite important in setting the scene for what I'm going to be talking about. It was taken about a year ago, and we were just coming back from a trip where we were in Malta, and we were showing the Maltese Search and Rescue and the Maltese Police Force how they can incorporate drones into their everyday industry. And what I didn't realize at the time when I took this photograph is it actually shows you how you should set up an organization in the correct manner. Now, if you try and, well, I should mention that this was about a year ago, and there was a certain airline that was having some problems, and there was a lot of flights being delayed. So we were delayed by a number of hours, and I found out that my wife actually loves jigsaw. So I bought this jigsaw, and what's the first thing that you need to know if you want to make a jigsaw? You need to know what the picture is, okay? So you have to know what it is, the end goal is. You have to know what you're trying to achieve. Now, there's a lot of people here from a lot of different backgrounds, so I'm not going to try and please everyone in talking about your specific use that you may be able to use drones in, but you probably already know that because you've seen a competitor or maybe you've tried to do it yourself. So the vision part, the picture part is yours, okay? So you have to decide what it is you want to use drones for. Now, what's the second thing that you do? So you have the picture you're trying to build, and you want to make a jigsaw. What do most people do next? They get the edges, okay? So we get the edges. And most people do this. I would say 70-80% of people do this. They try and get the edges. I would describe that as the framework. That's certainly the approach that I take. So we put the framework on it. My wife, however, is different, and I don't think that she'll mind me saying it, because my wife, she likes to go for the low-hanging fruit. So what does she do? She goes for all the colourful bits to try and make something that's in the picture. Okay, so she reaches out and she tries to get to the end goal. And we see this time and time again with companies who say they see drones and they see the use case and they rush to try and achieve it. Okay, we call this the Leaning Tower of Pisa method, and I'm going to describe to you a little bit more about what that is in a few minutes. But it's destined to fail, and it's not the best approach. So what I'm going to give you today in the short period of time that I have is the structure that you should apply for your organization if you want to incorporate drones in, and that's all I can do in the time that we have. What I will encourage you to remember is that after you've done the structure, you're going to rush to try and make the nice colourful pieces, but there's lots of other stuff that you have to do, and if you don't do that, if you ignore it, when you bring drones into your organization, you are going to hit multiple roadblocks, and the system is not fail-safe, okay? It's very important. So this is a very famous photograph. It's the first heavier-than-air aircraft that took off, okay? Over 100 years ago, this event took place. And time again, people say to me, this drone stuff, it's not really going to catch on. We're not going to see package delivery. You know, drones, they're a little bit overrated. This photograph was taken a number of years later. Anyone know roughly how many years later? 66 years. So in 66 years, we went from nothing had ever flown heavier than air, had ever flown before this day, and 66 years later, we put a human being onto the moon, okay? The level of innovation is incredible, and this is in an industry that's incredibly regulated. Yeah, that puts roadblocks in our way, and we put a human being on the moon. Okay, so when I hear the package delivery won't happen, I think that is not the case, and this stuff is happening. Okay, so as an industry and as an organization, you can ignore drones because maybe they won't affect you. But if this happened in 66 years, and this is in a time when innovation was much slower than it is happening at the rate we see today, well then you are going to lose competitive advantage versus your competitors if you don't at least acknowledge that drones could affect your organization. So I've spent the majority of my professional career taking selfies, and this one shows what I've been doing for all those years, which is teaching military pilots to fly aircraft. So I've been in the military for 12 years, but as time has gone on, I've found that I'm mostly flying a desk these days, and for the last year, as Ken said, I've just finished my MBA, so I've been doing a lot of reading. But about 5 years ago, I started to get involved with drones in 2013, and that was an important year for drones. We'll speak about why in just a few minutes. But when it comes to drones, this is a little bit like, you know, what my friends think I do, what my parents think I do, and what I actually do. Well, this is how I feel. Because in drones, we are all children, and this is a younger version of myself. But the technology is so new, and it's constantly changing. We're all like children, and we're just feeling around and trying to figure out where we are and what's going to happen. And no one, of course, really knows. But we have some good ideas about what might happen in the future. And so a number of years ago we set up the Unmanned Aircraft Association of Ireland. The Unmanned Aircraft Association of Ireland is a body that represents all stakeholders in the drone industry in Ireland, and our main purpose is to communicate with the Irish Aviation Authority. The Irish Aviation Authority is an organisation that regulates all aviation activity in Ireland, including unmanned aircraft, because these things are aircraft. Legally, they're defined as aircraft. Okay, so when we put one of these in the sky, we are now pilots flying an aircraft as far as the law is concerned. The Irish Aviation Authority, in its history, and all aviation authorities internationally, have never had to deal with the general public. They have only ever dealt with professionals from the aviation industry. And this is a huge challenge, because if you come to them as an industry with no aviation experience, you don't even speak the same language. So the Unmanned Aircraft Association of Ireland serves the purpose of trying to bridge that barrier so we can ease communication and we can keep industry moving forward for the purpose of everyone. Previous to this, and the background that I have in drones is we have a software company, and so we've built a software company. We've partnered with the world's largest drone manufacturer, and our software turns drones like this that are €1,000 into search and rescue drones. Okay, and the point is that it's all happening in Ireland. Not so much on the hardware side, but certainly there are some really exciting companies in Ireland on the software side, which is obviously a strength that we have. And we also have a training school where we train people to use drones. And so I have experience in a lot of different areas, which has led me to be in this position in the Unmanned Aircraft Association of Ireland, where we really act on your behalf as industry. And so what I want to talk about in the time that I have left is, just so you have a framework, is to give you a little bit on the past of drones, because there's a lot of misconceptions, talk about where we are today, and then project to what might happen in the future. Okay. So, in case you don't want to believe me, which is okay, you should believe these people. So PwC brought out a report in 2016. And PwC see drones as being important enough that they have a drone department where they do drone consultation for industry. It's based in Poland. And in 2016, they released this report called Clarity from Above. I would invite you to go and read this. It's a very, very interesting report. Here's some numbers. So people think drones and they think, well, you know, Hollywood, pictures, photographs, maybe auctioneers to sell houses. PwC looked at the key commercial application of drones, and you'll see media and entertainment is down as 8. And 8 represents 8 billion, okay? So what they've looked at is current money that's in the system that they think is going to be disrupted by drone technology. So it's going to move from wherever that money is being pushed toward now, it's going to move across and be replaced by drones, okay? So 8 is quite a small number when you compare it to infrastructure, where they've predicted that it's going to be, by 2020, it'll be in the region of 45 billion. So it's a huge, huge amount of money. This is a serious topic and we should take it seriously. The type of things that they're talking about here, well, you've probably already an idea of, again, how they might affect your business, but in the construction phase, how you can improve efficiency, how you can improve safety on a construction site, and how you can see how the plans are reflected in what we're actually seeing in the field. And then maintenance of assets, and if you read this report, it'll explain it all in detail. Obviously, we don't have time to go through it today, but just to show you that the numbers they're talking about is really, really quite large. So most people think the drones only started a couple of years ago, but just to really quickly show you, they actually started way back in the 1930s and even before, not so long after first manned aircraft took to the sky. And this was as a weapon, so often in the military, this is where this technology is seen first. In World War II, JFK's eldest brother, he was the first person to die on an unmanned aircraft. If you're ever at a type of quiz and they ask that question, it's an interesting one. So it's an unmanned aircraft, and he died on board. How does that happen? Well, this was Operation Aphrodite, and they configured these aircraft. The pilot would fly it for a while, point it at France or Germany, and then they'd walk down the back and they'd jump out. And the aircraft would fly itself for the rest of the mission on a pre-programmed route, therefore becoming an unmanned aircraft. Unfortunately, in the case of John F. Kennedy's eldest brother, Joseph, the aircraft exploded while they were on board. Okay? But the technology was being deployed all the way back then. In Vietnam, the American military used drones extensively for reconnaissance, and a lot of this information was only released a number of years ago. This was called the Fire Bee. It was only supposed to fly twice, so after 2 flights it was supposed to not be able to use. And this particular aircraft that we see in the photograph is used on 68 missions, And you can see they were marking it as they went here. So it was launched from a mothership, and then it would carry out the mission. So the technology was progressing relatively slowly and in parallel with manned aviation. And then we hit an inflection point in 2001 when, well, we all remember this day, but the funding that was coming from the military switched over to the CIA, which became more of a limitless budget. Okay? And so what we saw then was a number of technologies accelerating and colliding, and it all led to this. Do people recognize this drone? It's become, in fact, as a word, the word drone has gone through one of the biggest transformations in the English dictionary. Because 10 years ago, drone meant Afghanistan and missiles and not a good thing. And now drone is privacy and this thing and my neighbor and a child. And the word is completely transformed in our mind. This drone is called a DJI Phantom 1. It was released in January 2013. And myself and Ushin, a really good friend of mine, we bought one of these around the summer of 2013. So one of the first drones in Ireland. And interestingly, they released it for €1,200. It had no camera. You had to stick your own camera on the bottom. It wasn't stabilized. It wasn't great, but it was pretty amazing because it was kind of just out of the box. Before this, you had to build your own drone. Now you could go and buy this piece of technology, which pretty much worked. Okay. So that takes us right through to today, because now today we see that the Phantom 1 has gone through a wave of improvement right up to 2018. And there's about 10 different variations on the Phantom. It looks the same, but it is not the same. Okay? These aircraft up here, the sensors they carry are far more advanced. The software that controls them is incredible, right to the point where they could pretty much fly themselves. If I set this drone up and we took off, we went out for coffee and came back, it would be in the same place. If I grabbed the drone and I dragged it to the bottom of the room, it would fly itself back to the position. Okay, and it would do it incredibly accurate, to centimeter accuracy. That's for €1,000. Okay, and a couple of years ago, you couldn't buy it. Never mind just get it for €1,000. And so, in parallel with this, DJI, this company, and they're a good example, although there are a lot of drone companies that you should research if you're going down the road of using drones. In parallel, they release a number of different models. This one on the very left is the one I have on the table. You can see it's very small, you'll almost fit it in your pocket. And these are the Mavic series. They have this one, which is, well, this was an important aircraft because it's called the Inspire, but you can change the camera, you can change the lens, or you could not put a camera on. You can put a different sensor, because remember, it's not necessarily a photograph that we're trying to take. What we're trying to capture is data. Okay? And obviously this data is important, that's what we're after, but the drone only serves the purpose of putting the sensor in a place safely and cheaply. And if we have a person that's doing a dangerous job, well, why not send a disposable aircraft to do the same thing and put that sensor where we need it to be at a particular point in time. Okay? So this was a big step. Obviously you can see that the price starts to accelerate upwards. This is called an M210, so this is like waterproof, weatherproof, bulletproof potentially. You can see here it's got a zoom camera, it's got a thermal camera, and this is kind of for search and rescue, or some industrial applications where we want to see, if you want to see the efficiency of a building, or potentially that heat is escaping from a particular part, the thermal camera here will show you that. Okay? And we go all the way up with DJI to, well, limitless in terms of what you're going to spend, but carrying cinema cameras or a LiDAR scanner or whatever else. Okay? So this is just, again, this is just one company to show you the rate that things have moved in just 5 years. If you are from a survey background, and even Murphy surveys are here, and they're going to be speaking in two speakers after me. There are a number of survey companies here. It's worth mentioning fixed-wing aircraft, because obviously they have much longer flight time. So with a quadcopter, you're looking at 20 to 30 minutes. With a fixed-wing aircraft, you could be looking at up to an hour. So you can cover a much bigger area. This is an aircraft that's worth mentioning because it's one of the more popular aircraft, but again, there are a number of ones that you should research. This is a SenseFly EB. It's less than a kilogram, so it's very, very light. Sometimes people will stand out and use themselves as a block to stop the aircraft when it's landing. I can't recommend that as an approach, but just to show you how small and light this aircraft is. And of course, from a safety point of view, if, for example, the motor fails, it's a fixed-wing aircraft, so the aircraft will glide gently to the ground. And in Switzerland, they've legally certified this aircraft as harmless, which means you can fly it over cities, you can fly it anywhere, okay? Which obviously from a survey point of view is very, very important. This is another company, Unique, spelt with a Y, so Y-U-N-E-E-C. Again, we're researching. They don't have the market share that, say, DJI would, but they have a lot of specific industrial applications. So again, just worth doing some investigation if you're at that stage in your organization where you're not really sure which drone you should be looking at. And so which drone should you choose? Well, there's a common misconception that if you pay a lot more, you're going to get a lot more. And that is certainly wrong in this industry. Okay, so the white line represents capability, the blue line represents price. You'll see that with a very low price, you start with a decent capability. The capability certainly not a linear relationship, it doesn't improve as much as the price goes up. And then you get to the point where you can keep spending money and you get a drone that isn't as good because there's only 5 of them being built by the companies, so you're carrying all their costs. Okay, so don't get sucked into thinking that if you're setting up a drone operation and you're a professional company, well then you have to buy a €5,000 drone or a €7,000 drone. It's not the case. Okay, for €1,000 or €1,500, you will now get what cost €4,000 to €10,000 just 3 to 4 years ago. Okay. To give you a little bit of an idea of the regulatory structure, and I won't dwell on this, but internationally, across the whole world, there's a company called the International Civil Aviation Organization. They make rules for all aviation, manned and unmanned, across the world. They're very slow to adopt any drone rules, so we're not too worried about those for the moment. The European Union and the European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, this organisation is one worth looking at because next year they're going to bring out rationalised drone rules for Europe, which the Irish Aviation Authority will have to adopt. So the regulatory system in Ireland is going to change dramatically. Ireland has always punched above its weight when it comes to aviation, and it doesn't change for drones. Our regulatory system is probably the most similar to where we will end up across all of Europe. Okay? And Europe has been looking to what we've done in Ireland, what the Irish Aviation Authority has done in Ireland, to see what the path should be forward. Okay? We invented duty-free in this country, which we are all very proud of, and I think that we've done some things with aviation regulation, which is also being recognised abroad. So for people who are incorporating drones into their operations in Ireland, they should have the least fear of all the organisations in Europe, because the regulatory system is going to be very, very similar. But the Irish Aviation Authority in 2015 released a statutory instrument which covers the use of drones, and very basically it says that we have to stay 30 metres from people and cars and buildings and boats. We can only fly 300 metres away. Now you're thinking, well, I want to survey something that's 500 metres away or a 500 square metre area, and it's going to make it difficult for you. The great thing about this is there's an exemption to every rule. Okay? And so there's a lot you can do without any training or qualifications or anything. But if you do very, very basic training and get a qualification from the Irish Aviation Authority, you can get an exemption to everything. Okay? They'll sign you off to fly absolutely anything, provided you show how you're going to do it in a safe way. Because all they care about is safety. And they're very, very encouraging of industry. Okay? We can't fly above 120 metres or 400 feet. Why? Well, because at 500 feet manned aviation starts, so that gives us a 100-foot buffer. You have a wind turbine, it's at 780 feet, and you want to inspect that. Well, a pilot shouldn't be flying so close to the wind turbine, so very, very easily we can put a case into the Irish Aviation Authority to say that we need to survey the wind turbine, and you get the same exemption. Okay, so don't be afraid of any of these numbers, but just to show you what the general rules are. Okay, we also have to be able to see the drone, which is an important point, and also throughout Ireland, there are a number of different airspaces that exist which say that we can or we can't fly in. Okay, controlled airspace, Class C airspace, restricted airspace. You'll hear all of this. If you type in drone airspace Ireland, it'll show you. You'll find an airspace map. You can just go on and you can click and see where you are and what the rules are in that area. Again, if you're certified, you can still fly in those areas. You just have to send an application into air traffic control. Very, very straightforward. So, if you decide that you want to do some sort of commercial operation, so in this case you want to create a 3D point cloud and you have your aircraft, what are you likely to have to do? Now there are so many different variations. This is a very, very simple example. Of course you'll need a drone. You'll probably need to do 2 days training. For each pilot will have to do 2 days training. That's theory training where they'll learn about airspace, meteorology, aircraft operations. The pilot will then go and do a skills test. So they'll meet an examiner and they'll fly the aircraft to show that they have a very basic level of skill. The pass rates in all of these are very, very high. you'll take out a new insurance policy, or you'll contact your insurer and incorporate drones into your organization. And then this can cause confusion, but if you think of Aer Lingus or Ryanair being operators or operators of aircraft, within the organization they have lots of pilots. Okay, so each pilot will need a PCC, which is a pilot competency cert, that certifies the pilot to fly an aircraft. Separately, the company will have an SOP, which is a specific operating permission. So the Irish Aviation Authority will give the company permission to operate drones, and then within that organisation, the pilots will fly the drones. Okay? The company itself will have an operations manual which says how we conduct our business. So how do we do our safety statements? How do we do risk assessment on site? How far can our pilots fly? We've put in this exemption, but our pilots must do X to satisfy the Irish Aviation Authority's requirements. Things like that. An important point, and back to what I mentioned at the start. So we've decided that this is our operation, this is our end goal, this is the cool stuff that we're chasing from this is the colourful part of the jigsaw, okay? The Leaning Tower of Pisa method says that we race to that as quickly as possible. We don't really worry about all the ancillary stuff, we just try and get there as quickly as possible. And as a company, once we realise that, then we're probably not going to spend so much time investing in all of the other stuff, because well, we achieve what we wanted and we're doing it just fine, so why would we change what we're doing? Okay? The other method is the pyramid method, which is what we'd recommend, and that would say that the wider we build the pyramid, the higher we can build the pyramid. So we start slow and we figure out all the other stuff that we need to do and we develop it all together. So we don't go and buy the €40,000 drone, we buy the €1,000 drone, and after we've crashed it and then we investigate why we crashed it, then we buy a second €1,000 drone. And once we've crashed a couple of drones, and I had this exact conversation with an organisation recently, okay? And they said, that all sounds great, that all sounds wonderful, but we're going to buy the €25,000 drone. They bought the €25,000 drone, a week later it fell out of the sky, and now their organisation has 0 drones, okay? Instead of starting small and building and building and building. Now, it wasn't their fault, but in this industry, these aircraft will fall out of the sky, okay? And after about 2 or 3 years, the equipment is obsolete. So don't think, when you buy a €10,000 drone, and use it for 10 years, $1,000 a year, those numbers, they will not work. So above the line is what we're trying to achieve. And here's all the other stuff that we need to be thinking about. So insurance, currency requirements. How often are your pilots flying? What's the max number of hours that your pilots can fly per day? Because if they fly too often or they're not current, then they're more likely to have an accident, okay? Risk assessments, what are they going to do when they arrive on site? What if the wind is too strong? Are you going to ring them and say, I don't care, launch the drone, and they don't bring the drone home with them? What will happen then? Okay, licensing, training, a lessons learned policy within your company, because it's all changing so quickly. Standard operating procedures, which is aviation has adopted heavily. How are you going to log your flights to track the experience of your pilots, and how are you going to apply for airspace? Okay? This is a very, very small selection of all of the things that you need to consider, and it's really, really important stuff. If you do all of this, then the day that somebody leaves the company, or you crash a drone or something goes wrong, you just keep building from there, okay? Instead of the whole thing just falling over. So should you join in? Well, the good news is that, and you can see this is a very, very scientific graph that I've researched, and I've got lots of data backing this up, but as time has gone on, what I've noticed is the rewards are still increasing because the technology is getting better relative to the price, and people have more experience, and there's more experienced pilots. So the rewards from an industry perspective are still getting better. The expectations early on were really high, and then we all got a bit of a correction. We came back down to earth, and now we're starting to move forward again. The risk is reduced dramatically, because I've seen organisations in this country that they started off and they spent €20,000 on drones, and the drones, they're sitting on a shelf now, they're just not used, okay? That risk has been removed dramatically because the aircraft are safer. There's about 8 sensors in this aircraft that will stop it crashing into something in front of it, behind it. It can hold its own altitude. If it's starting to run out of battery, it'll come back and land. If you tell it you don't want it to, it doesn't care, it still comes back and lands. Okay? So there's so many safety features built into the aircraft. And again, this is a €1,000 drone, so it's very, very cheap. So the rewards are increasing, the risk is reducing, so it's certainly not too late, and it is a good time to start thinking about, if you haven't already started to think about how you might incorporate drones into your operations. To show you, because we often don't see drones in Ireland, but you know they're being used quite a lot, just to show you some of the companies, not the ones represented here today, but some of the state bodies and also some of the larger organisations. We've obviously, the military have been using drones for a number of years. The civil defence have an extensive drone program. They were one of the first to adopt them in Ireland. Mountain rescue throughout the country, particularly in Donegal. Geological Survey of Ireland have mapped a large area of the coastline using drones, fixed wing and multi-rotor aircraft, and they have quite a large range extension, because by the sea it's very, very safe, provided they're aware of Coast Guard helicopter movements and the likes. It's very easy to see an aircraft coming. The Environmental Protection Agency, Éireann Road Éireann, city and county councils, particularly in active environmental issues where people are dumping, survey companies as are represented here today, the ESB, the Coast Guard, and even the National Ambulance Service are all using drones today. Okay, so right now there are a number of drones in Ireland capturing data for whatever purpose. So it's certainly something that's not going to disappear. If you want to do some more research, this is a good place to start. Again, I'm not endorsing these companies, but they have certainly have a reputation as a good place to start. So the SenseFly EB is the name of this survey aircraft. DJI, they have about 70% market share for commercial off-the-shelf drones, ready-to-go drones. So they have a wide range. None of it's very, very specific, because they're really trying to, shock and blast a big market. Unique are more on industrial applications. A hybrid in the middle, Skycatch is an American company that is looking at machine learning to automate drones that are flying on construction sites. Okay, so they're really looking at removing the person from it, and the drone will monitor the construction process autonomously. And then from the software point of view, drone deploy mainly targeting agriculture, but also providing the ability to create 3D point clouds, all done remotely. So the drone flies, it lands, you send everything off to the cloud, it gets processed in the States, and they send you back a file. Okay, so that takes quite a while, number of hours. And then Pix4D is another company that a lot of survey companies would use. So I would invite you to go and research those yourselves. Just a couple of more minutes to go. So a little glance at the future. So on Post doing package delivery, DHL package delivery, Amazon package delivery, what do people think? Nonsense? Well, this was real, but it was just a publicity stunt, so they flew the aircraft, but obviously on Post aren't doing package delivery. When you have companies like Amazon putting huge amount of money into this, you can only see it going in one direction. There's actually quite a lot of infrastructure requirements. You would think that it's just, you launch a drone, and it's not quite so simple. They figured that they'll have to put a lot of infrastructure on the ground so that drones from competing companies don't crash into each other, etc. But certainly there are so many reasons why this makes more sense. And when you think about it, in this day and age, we get a human being, we put them on a motorbike, they take a pizza and they stick it in the back of the motorbike. You're insuring the motorbike, you're putting a person at risk in the dark, they sit in the motorbike and they drive the pizza to your house. Why would you not get a drone to do that for you? Inspection of aircraft at airfields. Okay, this is already happening today, so it's not the future, it's today. Carrying a defibrillator, so instead of spending huge amount of money, particularly in cities, having defibrillators within arm's reach, that we have a number of stations where you can deploy a defibrillator in minutes in a city. It's so logical. Again, there are some areas that we have to cross over in terms of how safe is the aircraft, etc. But there is a company working on this. And blood delivery in areas that don't have proper road infrastructure, like in Africa. This is happening in Rwanda right now. Right? Some other ideas, crop spraying. Well, actually, drones have been used for crop spraying since the 90s. So again, particularly if you've an area where you don't want to drive a tractor in and ruin your crops, you can send a drone. If we want to fight fires, particularly in a specific area in a building, and we can move the hose right up to that fire, it seems logical. This is in testing, not an operation. This one is already in operation. A PwC report will talk about the cost of an inspection on a wind turbine being €1,500, and we can easily half it per inspection and remove the risk of putting people up on, with ropes up onto the wind turbine by using a drone. So very, very logical, and of course the ability to save people's lives, which is hugely beneficial. This might all seem like a little bit of a minefield, so if you feel like that, please do come up to me afterwards, and we would be more than happy to help. And if we can't help you, we'll certainly be able to connect you with somebody who can. And I'll leave you almost second last, a couple of quotes. Okay, so radio has no future. Heavier than air flying machines are impossible, and X-rays would prove to be a hoax. This was a British scientist in 1899. His name is William Thomson. So what I'd encourage you to do is don't be like William Thomson. And I'll leave you on one last story. People again say driverless cars, it'll never take off. Well, there was a time when an elevator, it was controlled and it was actually moved by a person. So a person had to pull on a chain, and there was a lever system that would, raise the elevator. And then one day they figured out a machine that would do this. They still had a person who'd push the button, because people wouldn't get in if there wasn't a person to push the button. They were too afraid; they wouldn't get in themselves. And over time, they figured, we're really going to have to move on. The person would still need to do, the big closing doors and keep the whole thing safe. When they got rid of all of that, and they said, no, we have to let people are going to have to take the step. People would not go in the elevators. So what did they do? They just put music in. Okay, and the music is still in elevators. You still see in really, really rich hotels, there's still a person pushing the button, which is just a reflection on our fear over large change. Okay, so we can say that it won't happen. We can list a million reasons why, but this stuff is coming. Okay, and you can see the numbers that PwC have given. That this change is going to happen. So I really encourage you to see how it could affect your organisation and to see how you might be able to use drones in your organisation. Thank you very much for your time.